On this Wednesday night, putting a clamp on rising COVID-19 cases in Canada's two largest provinces. More restrictions in Quebec.
We basically did everything the government asked us, and we're still shutting down.
And in Ontario, the pressure and the pushback to close again. The last straw for single-use plastics.
They are harmful in the environment.
How Ottawa's proposed ban will make only a small dent, plus the blow to businesses. A colossal contributor to climate change, the harmful effects of fertilizer used in farming. And Facebook finally blocks some conspiracy theorists, the difficulty in deleting them.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are continuing to watch the spread of COVID-19, especially in Canada's two biggest provinces. Quebec's premier has asked people to keep going to work and to school, but otherwise to stay home. New case numbers were below 1,000 in Quebec today, but hospitalizations have doubled in 2 weeks. Toronto's public health officer warns the infection rates in parts of that city is rising so fast if restrictions aren't reimposed, including closing restaurants and bars the way Quebec has, infections may not peak until next spring.
The experience from other jurisdictions is such that the earlier we intervene, the lesser the impact of COVID-19 on the health of the community and the shorter the duration of the control measures.
But Ontario's premier is resisting closing bars and restaurants until he has hard evidence they're spreading the virus.
There are some bad actors, but we can't paint them all with a broad brush. And we just can't shut down people's livelihoods that quickly with a broad brush.
It is a difficult call, weighing when to reimpose tight restrictions no one likes against the risk of losing more lives to this virus. Mike Armstrong has our top story tonight.
This gym's only been reopened for a couple of months after the first lockdown, but they'll be locking the doors again as of Friday, the newest wave of restrictions hitting Quebec despite efforts to avoid it.
We basically did everything the government asked us, and we're still shutting down.
The province is asking Quebecers to stay home as much as possible, and it's cutting most of the reasons people might want to leave home. In most of the province, gyms and organized sports are being shut down, bars are closed, and restaurants are takeout only. In Quebec, COVID-19 outbreaks are spreading and hospitalizations are growing. One of the latest outbreaks, a major junior hockey team north of Montreal. It has 18 confirmed cases and just played a game on the weekend. Both teams have now shut down. One thing distressing to health officials is that the age group most at risk is also the fastest growing. Seniors 65 and over, as a percentage of all cases, more than doubled in a week.
In the last week it was 6%, and now we have an average of 12 or 15%.
Now, in Ontario, another call for the province to close bars and restaurants. Toronto public health officials Wednesday again appealed to the province to take action and appealed to the public to think twice before leaving home.
Do you really need to do that activity, or is it just something that you want to do?
Toronto Public Health says of its recent outbreaks, 44% were from restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues. The Premier says he believes that's bad actors not following protocols, and for now, he doesn't want to close businesses.
But we have to be very, very careful when we're messing with people's lives like this.
The one appeal that seems to be shared by every level of government is for the coming holiday weekend. Thanksgiving, they say, should be shared only with people from the same household. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Here are the numbers across the country today. Inside the Atlantic bubble, a concerning development. New Brunswick is reporting 17 new cases. That's a record for the province. They're all linked to an outbreak at a long-term care home in Moncton. Manitoba has 32 new cases today, Saskatchewan 10, Alberta has 143, and BC 115. France is expected to announce new restrictions tomorrow after an alarming record was set today. Nearly 19,000 new COVID-19 cases were reported in France in 24 hours. In Paris, all bars, gyms, and swimming pools have already been closed and will stay that way until at least October 20th. Only restaurants that observe strict hygiene rules can stay open. Infections in France have increased rapidly since late August. Hospitalizations have reached a 3-month high, and as of Tuesday, 40% of intensive care beds in Paris hospitals were occupied. New restrictions are likely coming to England, too. For the second day in a row, more than 14,000 new cases of COVID-19 were reported in the UK. Hospitalization rates and deaths are also on the rise. And as Crystal Gamansing reports, Scotland's First Minister has already announced tough new restrictions and closures of pubs and restaurants. No more pints in central Scotland, and if you want to get a drink anywhere else in the country, it'll have to be on a patio.
The reason we are not closing indoor hospitality completely is that we know the benefits in terms of reducing loneliness and isolation, of giving people, particularly those who live alone, somewhere they can meet a friend for a coffee and a chat.
Millions of people in the UK are living with localised restrictions, but the opposition Labour Party says the government is failing. Cases are still rising in 19 of 20 communities in England with measures in place.
If Prime Minister can't see and hear local communities when they say the infection rate has gone up tenfold under restrictions and he doesn't realise that's a problem, then that is part of the problem.
What we are doing is a combination of national and local measures, which one week, Mr. Speaker, he comes to this House and supports, and the next week, mysteriously, he decides to whisk his support away.
But Boris Johnson is also losing support from his own party members as politicians and the public grow frustrated with the rules and those making them. Ireland and Brussels are also turning off the taps.
I understand why, but I think it's a bit long for a month to not have alcohol served. So it's a bit sad, yeah. For students at least.
Scotland's rules are being imposed for just 16 days. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London. A plan to seriously reduce plastic waste in Canada began to take shape today. The federal government says the end is coming for these single-use plastics. Plastic grocery bags, straws, stir sticks, six-pack rings for cans, plus cutlery and some food containers. It's part of the government's push to achieve zero plastic waste by 2030. Mike LeCouture looks at what's in the plan and what's been left out.
The owners of this Ottawa cafe pride themselves on being environmentally friendly. The pandemic paused their discount program for people who brought their own cups and dishes. And to survive, they had to grow the takeout side of the business.
We had to adapt and therefore increase our amount of takeout containers. So we use them quite a lot. We do try to stick to recycled materials, but sometimes that's just not possible.
And now she's facing the prospect of a ban on those lower cost containers as they try to deal with declining revenues and increasing costs due to COVID-19.
You might as well just shut us down, to put it blatantly, because if you're going to give us the demand that it has to be a recycled material, then you should probably make it more cost effective for us.
Environment Minister Jonathan Wilkinson contends the proposed ban only affects a small percentage of plastic products that can't be recycled, adding it's part of a bigger plan to increase the country's recycling capacity. Canadians throw away more than 3 tons of plastic every year. Only 9% of it is recycled.
To be honest, I mean, we are not leading the world in this. This is exactly the same kind of approach that many countries in Europe, including the United Kingdom, have gone down this path.
Environmentalists say Canada should be more ambitious than the European Union, even though it's considered the gold standard for recycling.
Setting low targets does no one any favors. If you're setting a low target because you admit that this material cannot be collected and it cannot be recycled, well, that's a justification for not using it.
Now, the proposed plan comes a day after Alberta unveiled its pro-plastic plan, which includes more manufacturing and making the province a recycling hub.
We have to ensure that it does not interfere with our ability to grow the economy.
The federal environment minister said the two plans dovetail perfectly because it will increase our recycling capacity, adding plastics will always be part of the economy. The goal is to keep them out of the environment. Donna?
All right, Mike LeCouture in Ottawa, thank you. Alberta's government is beginning to set its sights beyond oil, and one thing it's looking at is hydrogen as a zero-emission fuel source. Hydrogen, when consumed in a fuel cell, produces only water. It can be produced from a variety of resources, including natural gas, which Alberta has an abundance of. Alberta's premier wants the province to become a major exporter of hydrogen by 2040. Though, as Heather Urex-West explains, there are obstacles to the plans.
It's been 2 months since Larry Schock lost his job in oil and gas.
The economy's just got so bad, and my boss shut his company down in end of August. So now yeah, I've been fighting, looking for new work.
It's been a difficult few years for Alberta's energy sector for a number of reasons, but among them, global energy markets that are now transitioning towards cleaner forms of fuel.
As the cleanest hydrocarbon-based fuel, natural gas, as a larger source of world energy, can massively reduce global greenhouse gas emissions.
It's why the province is now looking to export hydrogen, a zero-emission fuel source that can be extracted from natural gas and sold to global markets.
This is something that takes the natural assets that Calgary or Alberta, is already rich in, and uses them in a way that is much more aligned with the energy transition and what energy demands of tomorrow are going to be needing.
Orenstein says there is an emerging market for hydrogen as countries around the world work to lower their greenhouse gas emissions. But if Alberta wants to cash in, it has a few obstacles to overcome, including the familiar problem of making sure there is enough pipeline capacity to get this natural gas product to market.
Those problems are not going to go away. And even if they do go away, it's not going to be a quick turnaround.
The technology isn't quite there yet either.
I think the big challenge for us is we do have to crack the carbon capture nut on a commercial level. We're very, very close.
The utility company CEO says it will be at least 5 years before hydrogen production is commercially viable in Alberta. And for those looking for work now, that's a long time to wait. Heather Yurex-West, Global News, Calgary.
There is a dire warning tonight about a greenhouse gas called nitrous oxide. It has hundreds of times more warming power in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. It comes from the nitrogen in agricultural fertilizer, which is used around the world to increase crop yields. As Eric Sorensen reports, it makes limiting global warming in the years ahead even more difficult.
In farming, almost as important as planting seeds are the fertilizers that help them grow. Ian McCreary uses nitrogen fertilizers from these tanks on his Saskatchewan farm.
Nitrogen fertilizer is a really important crop nutrient to improve our crop yields.
As it is for crops all over the world. But a byproduct, nitrous oxide, is a greenhouse gas. And a new report says nitrous oxide emissions are increasing faster than climate scientists ever envisioned.
For nitrous oxide, we're increasing at a rate that exceeds the worst case scenario right now, which is pretty devastating.
Carbon dioxide is responsible for about 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions. That's followed by methane, and then comes nitrous oxide contributing about 7%. But it packs a punch. Nitrous oxide molecules are up to 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to global warming. More than half of nitrous oxide emissions are natural, coming mostly from the soil. Human-caused nitrous oxide is almost 70% from agricultural production. And overall, nitrous oxide is accumulating in the atmosphere at an increasing rate, 10% greater than in the 1980s. Scientists say nitrous oxide poses a serious threat to keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. Agriculture is one industry that gets climate change. Farmers spend their lives watching the skies.
And they're seeing it in their own operations, that the weather is more unpredictable, more extreme, and more damaging.
The fertilizer industry is not disputing the harm, instead developing methods for farmers to apply fertilizers more efficiently to reduce runoff and emissions.
So the idea is get as much of the fertilizer into the plant and then limit the emissions that are problematic for the environment.
In this country, critics say Ottawa should do more, from independent soil testing to investments in research and organic farming.
If the federal government wants to be serious about fighting climate change, they really need to be putting food and agriculture at the top of the agenda.
Ian McCreary says he'd like to use something that doesn't produce nitrous oxide, but even scientists say that won't be easy because increasing emissions come from agriculture, and we can't stop growing food. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Hurricane Delta's path of destruction. Coming up, what happened when it hit Mexico? This is what it looked like when Hurricane Delta made landfall just south of Cancun, Mexico. There are no reports of injuries, but more than 40,000 people had to seek emergency shelter. Delta is now in the Gulf of Mexico. It's expected to gain strength again before hitting Louisiana. In Salt Lake City, Utah, the stage is set for tonight's U.S. vice presidential debate. At the White House, President Trump, who has COVID-19, broke self-isolation rules today and went to the Oval Office. He also released a video claiming he is cured and claiming he has authorized the use of Regeneron, a drug he took that has not been approved for use except in clinical trials and on compassionate grounds.
I think this was a blessing from God that I caught it. This was a blessing in disguise. I caught it. I heard about this drug. I said, let me take it. It was my suggestion. I said, let me take it. And it was incredible the way it worked. Incredible.
He's not a doctor. He can't authorize the use of drugs, and there is no cure. As Jackson Prosco reports, President Trump is leaving millions of Americans affected by the pandemic wondering if they'll get federal aid.
Stuck in isolation inside the White House, the president spent the day rage tweeting before returning to the Oval Office, despite the risk of infecting West Wing staff.
He wanted to go to the Oval yesterday. If he decides to go to the Oval, we've got safety protocols there.
Less than 4 weeks from Election Day, the pandemic is the defining issue of the campaign, with case numbers high and millions of Americans unsure of whether they'll get government support after Trump called off negotiations with Democrats for a bailout. The economy is teetering.
Too little support would lead to a weak recovery, creating unnecessary hardship for households and businesses.
Tonight, the virus will be in clear view as vice presidential candidates Mike Pence and Kamala Harris sit down to debate from behind plexiglass.
Having Trump out of the hospital doesn't mean the end of the discussion about how they've mishandled the coronavirus.
Both VP candidates face extra scrutiny, with the current 74-year-old president sick and his rival, 77-year-old Joe Biden, on track to be the oldest incoming president in history if elected.
Now we have two very senior people running for president, and I think there's a real focus on the vice president in a way that we've never seen before.
Pence and Harris are vastly different from the men at the top of the ticket, but are set to tackle the same issues that defined the first presidential debate, knowing full well voters may be looking for reassurance at a time of unprecedented uncertainty. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Billionaires are not being hit hard by this pandemic. On the contrary, new research shows the wealth of the world's billionaires reached a record $10.2 trillion during the height of this pandemic. That's an increase of 27.5% from the start of April. Tech and healthcare billionaires made the most money. Researchers say it's because they turned to innovation to help ride the storm. There is now a record number of billionaires, 2,189. Still ahead, Facebook cracks down on conspiracy theorists.
You're watching Global National.
There are all kinds of conspiracy theories online, and now Facebook has finally banned one of them from all its platforms. QAnon believers spread wild theories based on zero facts that a group of politicians and A-list celebrities is running a satanic baby-eating child sex abuse ring and plotting to undermine President Trump. QAnon has moved from the fringes to the mainstream, amplified by Facebook, which profited from its extremist views. Will today's ban make any difference? That's what Jeff Semple is looking at tonight.
Could be picking up dead virus.
Over the course of the pandemic, this Montreal man has gone viral, posting videos promoting QAnon conspiracy theories and receiving hundreds of thousands of views. But his Facebook account is now closed, part of a conspiracy crackdown by the social media giant.
I think it's an important gesture.
Facebook is now removing any group or page that openly identifies with QAnon, the group promoting the baseless belief that a secret cult of celebrities and government officials are running a child trafficking ring.
Your facts are not facts.
QAnon claims the same secret cult is behind the pandemic, part of an attack on Donald Trump's presidency.
I understand they like me very much, which I appreciate.
The letter Q logo has become a staple at protests against masks, lockdowns, and vaccines, including here in Canada.
The pandemic is really, in my view, when this thing jumped borders.
The man who crashed his pickup truck through the gates of Rideau Hall in July was allegedly inspired by QAnon.
March especially, we noted a huge uptick in
conversation on mainstream social media platforms about QAnon.
A British think tank recently tracked QAnon posts by country.
Canada is in the top 5 highest countries, top 5 countries most discussing QAnon online.
But many of those discussions and posts are now gone, caught by Facebook's QAnon purge.
The problem is, I think that the narratives have filtered so far into not just the far right, but into the mainstream that, it's like putting the genie back in the bottle.
Global News found examples of Facebook pages that didn't specifically mention QAnon, but promote its imagery and beliefs. And while that Montreal conspiracy theorist's Facebook page is down, his YouTube site is still up.
It's just going to be it's a game of whack-a-mole. They'll be driven off of one social media site and go to another.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Stranded off sea. Next, it takes a village to move a seal. They're calling him Stan, and he is the most expensive dinosaur fossil ever sold at an auction. The winning bidder paid $42.4 million for the nearly complete T-Rex skeleton, quadruple the estimate by Christie's auction house. Paleontologists worry such sales will encourage more private trade of fossils, leaving important specimens off limits to researchers. Another massive creature is the star of a video that was taken in Chile. This 2-ton elephant seal somehow ended up on a residential street during curfew in a coastal suburb in Chile late on Monday. Dozens of people mobilized and helped guide it back to sea. They used black tarps to direct the seal down the street, clapping and cheering, and then it made its way back to the water. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the village of Westport in eastern Ontario. No elephant seals there. Beautiful spot, though. Please email us your Canada to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.